Welcome back, everybody, to Magic with Randy. I am Randy, and today we're breaking down the last weekend before we have the new set come out, Aether Drift. So just kind of going over what's been happening this last little weekend, going on to Standard, what it means for your RCQs, RCQ season, all that fun jazz. Real quick, guys, if you like what you're doing, like what you're seeing, like what I'm doing, go ahead and leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel; it really helps me out. Let's get into it. So starting off with the first Standard Challenge on Friday, we had 9 Dimir mid-range decks, 6 Esper Bounce, 5 Gruul Aggro, 3 Dimir Bounce, 3 Golgari mid-range, 2 Domain, and a couple different one-ofs. So nothing too surprising here by these numbers. We're still seeing, Dimir, either Dimir mid-range or Dimir Bounce be one of the top decks right next to Esper Bounce. Right next to Cruel Aggro, and then for some reason Golgari refuses to die and keeps putting up a couple numbers as well. But we kind of see like this battle between whether Dimir mid-range, Dimir Bounce is what you want to be doing, and I think it's kind of like 50-50 one way or the other. I think either way you slice it, both decks are very good. Both are very impactful in the meta, so I think if you want to play Dimir Bounce, play Dimir Bounce. You want to play Dimir mid-range, play Dimir mid-range. Both of them are still going to be good. I also think that moving into the new season or new standard with the new set coming out, I don't see either, that deck, either one of those decks losing percentage points as a whole. I don't think either one's going to start doing worse. Same thing with Esper Bounce. I don't see that going anywhere. Gruul Aggro is definitely not going anywhere. There's some new red aggro cards that might be playable in the new set. So, nothing crazy there. I don't see anything really shaking up too crazy in standard. Now, obviously, I could be wrong. There could be some new busted deck that I haven't seen or haven't figured out, or insert whatever thing, and we could just see standard get broken wide open, and turns out Domain's the best thing to be doing now because they got 4 cards I didn't notice that just put them over top of the edge. I don't think it's gonna happen. I don't think I'm that blind when it comes to new sets, but I don't see standard really changing up any way in the sense of like any new broken decks breaking out. Obviously, time will tell. That being said, though, Golgari did win. I'm still not sure how this deck wins. Just as a whole, it's not doing anything crazy. It's not doing anything majorly new. We're still playing, 4 Llanowar Elves, 4 Mosswood Dread Knight, 4 Preachers, 3 Sentinels, full black there just to have some graveyard hate in the main. Shieldred because it's a good card. Thrun because it can't be bounced. Cut down, Anoint with Affliction, Go for the Throat, Maelstrom Pulse, Terra Thunder. All these, good removal spells, Gix Command to help clear up a bunch of little creatures. It's not doing anything different. It's not really anything crazy. This isn't. I mean, the biggest thing we've seen, from the beginning of standard season till now is that, we're no longer playing. Excuse me. Sorry, I apologize about that. We're no longer playing the demon package and trying to get all that draw and value stuff like that. We're just now more streamlined, creature mid-range deck, but it's not doing anything impressive. It's not doing anything great. I still think the bounce decks have a good matchup against this deck, so I'm not sure why this deck sees so much play. But that's not for me to judge. That being said, I think the deck is still apparently well positioned because it keeps putting up numbers and keeps doing well. So clearly, I am wrong about it not being a good deck. I don't know. As someone who played a bunch of the tempo decks and stuff to get the invite to the RC. I just feel like this deck isn't good when you're playing, this town ain't big enough and just bouncing all their 3-drops and stuff like that to recast your 1-drops. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just crazy. But Golgari still doing well, still putting up numbers, still taking down tournaments. Clearly not a terrible choice. I just don't feel like it's good. Moving on to the first Saturday challenge, though, we had 9 Esper Bounce decks, 5 Gruul Aggro decks, 4 Dimir mid-range decks, 3 Golgari decks still, 2 Mono Red, 2 Jeskai, Convoke, 2 Dimir Bounce. We now have Grixis Bounce as well, and some other one-ofs there. But again, not too surprising. Esper Bounce is, one of the best decks to be playing, I think, in this format. It is super tempo oriented. It just does a lot of things that you want it to be doing in this game plan. It has the ability to be super aggro, has the ability to play a long game, has the ability to kind of burn out your opponent with their discard enchantment. That name escapes me at this time. Just being able to rebuy that, continuously bounce it, things like that. So it's not too surprising to see this deck still putting up 9 copies. in a challenge. Gruul Aggro is still also really good. The deck hasn't lost anything, it hasn't gained anything, it's just a good deck. This deck will probably be around until the mice package eventually rotates out. Mouse package is really good. I don't have much more to say about that. Once again, Dimir mid-range is putting up more numbers than Dimir bounce. Again, I think it's 50-50 if you want to play whichever deck. Mono Red's still putting up some numbers. I'm not sure why. I think Gruul Aggro is just the best choice among the aggro decks, but for some reason there are some diehard Mono Red fans out there. I'm not sure what their argument is for not splashing green. It's essentially a free color to splash, especially with the dual lands we have going on right now. It's just it costs you nothing essentially to splash it, and you just get a bunch of, you get some card draw with Questioning Druid, you get some better sideboard cards, things like that. You get some better card choices and better card selection. I'm not sure why you still want to play that. Jeskai Evoke, I think, is still a very, very powerful deck. I think it's still really good against all the Esper bounce strategies going around, or all the bounce strategies going around. You could go super wide. Obviously, I think that deck loses a little bit more to itself than anything else. That being said, though, with the new set coming out and getting a couple different one-drops, as well as some better mana fixing, I think we might see Jeskai go back to being Boros Convoke, just being more streamlined, and I think a little bit better as a whole. It was not going to lose to itself so much with its own lands, or pinging itself to death with all the pain lands it has to play. So I do think that deck actually is going to get better here going into the new standard format, or the new with the new set coming out. I could be wrong, but I think that's going to be a really well positioned deck moving forward. That being said, though, we did see Dimir bounce ticking down the tournament here. Not too surprising. There's nothing too crazy going on in this list. Which is funny enough, I'd almost classify this as a Dimir mid-range deck, because we're playing, 3 Curiosities, 3 Kaidos in it, but it was classified as Dimir bounce as a whole. But you're still playing, Spygrass Siren, Fear of Isolation, Floodplain Drowners, Hopeless Nightmare, that's the enchantment I was trying to think of, Storm Teacher's Talent, Nowhere to Run, and 2 Go for the Throat as our removal spells, along with this town ain't big enough, and then Kaido to give us, a little bit more reach as far as damage and proactively doing things. Playing 2 manlands. Sideboard's nothing too crazy, kind of what you would expect as a whole. Going up a little bit on the sideboard there with Gix Command and Shieldreds, but I think this deck is just super well positioned. I think that the Esper deck might be a little bit better, just in the sense of being able to deal a little bit more burst damage out of nowhere with the Nurturing Pixie and the Eerie creature. That whenever you're playing enchantment, you get to put a counter on something. I think it does a little bit better of a burst strategy, but obviously you have a little bit worse mana being 3 colors versus 2, so I can see the appeal being both Dimir or Esper as a whole, and I get why people are playing these decks. I get why they're good as a whole. It's not too surprising. Another list though I want to talk about real quick is this Jeskai Oculus list. Essentially, that was didn't do super well in the challenge. It maybe top 32, so it wasn't like terrible, but kind of an interesting little take on the Jeskai or the Oculus type strategy. Playing Props Memory. Card's really good when you get to actually draw cards. Gets to have a good little early game with Fear missing out and Spygrass Siren. Fear also helps us put Oculus into the graveyard. We got that Steam Core Scholar as well to be able to discard our cards. Because if you have to discard, you have to draw 2, and then you have to discard 2 cards unless you discard an instant sorcerer creature or a creature with flying. Notably, Oculus has flying for some reason. So being able to put Oculus into the graveyard, get to draw 2, discard 1, super nice. We have Helping Hand, Reclamation to buy back all our creatures. We get Torch the Tower as our removal spell choice, along with Scorching Dragonfire. And we get to play some Charted Courses and Unsummons as well for more card draw and removal. Same with the 1 Shelter by Ghost, and we get to play 2 Inties as well as a way to discard and make our creatures big. Just a kind of a cool little package. I really like this deck as a whole. I'm not sure how good this is with all the this tiny big enough running around, but it's definitely a deck that I enjoy looking at and would enjoy playing. But I don't think it's necessarily super good just with all this tiny big enough running around. It does kind of make it hard. Same thing with the Herbrest Forge. I really like that card as a whole in the sideboard, but I just feel playing that into this tower big enough just feels so bad when you play 3 mana for then pay 2 mana to bounce it and just completely ignore what you're doing. Obviously, you know, that's not something you're sideboarding in against this tiny big enough decks. It's just something to notate. Like, I do like this deck, but you know, 3 mana spells are kind of hard to justify, in my opinion, with all those type of decks running around. That being said, they don't always have it. They don't have a million. This town ain't big enough. So it does feel bad when it happens type situation. But I just kind of want to point this deck out as something interesting that caught my eye going through these challenges and looking at the deck lists, looking at what's going on in Standard, and trying to stay prepared for that while also keeping up with what's going on in Modern, all the RCs and things like that. But just a fun little deck. Looked kind of cool, looked kind of fun. Just kind of wanted to point it out. But moving on to the second challenge here for Saturday. We once again had 7 Esper Bounces lists in there. We had 6 Gruul Aggro, 5 Dimir Bounce, 4 Golgari midrange, 3 Domain, 2 Dimir midrange, and then a couple different one-ofs. Notably that Jeskai Oculus deck is back again. And then looks like the Omniscience combo is coming back. Seems to be keeping popping up in numbers there. Kind of a cool little deck. I don't know if it's super well positioned as a whole, but it is fun to see it do well and put up some numbers here and there. But like I said, you know, kind of more of the same here. We still have aggro being, you know, in the mix. We have Esper Bounce, Dimir Bounce, and Dimir midrange all, you know, putting up numbers. Golgari midrange keeps putting up numbers. Kind of like, you know, these core, essentially, you can expect, you know, going into any RCQ or anything like that, you can pretty much expect, you know, there's going to be some number of Esper Bounce, some number of Dimir Bounces. Same thing with Golgari midrange and Dimir midrange, and then some number of aggro decks, and probably some number of Domain if you're in Ohio or Michigan area, because people love their Domain decks up here for some reason. I'm not sure why. I don't think the deck's bad per se by any means. I don't think it's like, you know, you're not laughed out of the tournament if you roll up with, you know, Zer Domain, but it is one of those decks that seems to have more popularity in my area than in the other areas as a whole. But, you know, kind of like what you can expect to see. Like, there's nothing too crazy going on in this challenge. That being said, Dimir Bounce did win again. Now, I know it looks like this is the exact list that just won, and it almost basically is. I think there is like 1 or 2 sideboard cards that are different, and that's about it. It is basically the same 75 that won our first challenge. I had to double check to make sure that this wasn't me messing up or something. But, you know, Dimir, like I said, Dimir Bounce is a good deck. It makes sense why it's doing well. You get to have, you know, good removal spells, good card draw, things like that. We might, you know, have finally figured out the 60 for Dimir Bounce, as to where, if you remember talking a couple months ago, you know, Dimir midrange was one of those decks that, like, every time it won, the 75 was always different. There was some different combination of lands, some different combination of creatures, some different combination of spells. It seems that perhaps maybe Dimir Bounce has figured out, you know, it's 60 as a whole, and obviously the sideboard is always going to be changing because it all depends on what you expect to play against, what you're expecting to shore up, you know, what matchups you're trying to shore up, things like that. So, not too surprising to see, you know, once again, this deck doing well. As a whole, I think it's very well positioned in the metagame, and I wouldn't be surprised to see this deck, you know, take down another big Standard tournament for anything coming up like that. I don't think, like I said, I don't think this deck is losing anything, or I don't think it's just like gaining anything either. With the new set coming out, Aether Drift, I don't think it's gaining anything, but I don't think it's going to lose any kind of percentage in the meta. It is just that strong, it's just that powerful of a deck. Alright, we had one more here on Sunday. It was the Standard Showcase Challenge. We had 5 Dimir Bounces, we had 5 Domains, 3 Mono Red, 3 Gruul Aggro, 3 Caretakers, 2 Esper Bounce, 2 of the Omniscience combo deck, 2 Golgari midrange, and then a bunch of different one-ofs. There, notably, some kind of interesting stuff in there with like Golgari self-mill and things like that. But, you know, once again, not too surprising. Dimir Bounce putting up 5 copies. Honestly, Domain putting up 5 copies is the big, like, surprise, honestly, for me. You just don't see that often. Caretakers, you know, kind of coming out of the woodworks as well. Esper Bounce putting up some numbers, not surprising there. Same with Golgari. Omni putting up Omni combo putting up 2 numbers was a little surprising. I think that deck has kind of a cult following. There's like a fringe group of people playing it who are really enjoying it, but it's not like really catching on big time. So I don't think that deck's ever going to be super popular. But it's one of those decks that's going to have a cult following probably till the end of its time in Standard. Kind of like how the Red Flood Caller deck has a cult following essentially and puts up numbers every now and then, but there's not a huge majority of players playing it. But kind of like this is almost the what you expect to see at one of like these bigger tournaments here. A little more caretakers, I think, because that deck is still well positioned in the meta as a whole, so it's not surprising to kind of see that deck pop back up where we don't see it so much in everyday challenges. So nothing too crazy here. And then Domain did end up winning the tournament, which isn't too surprising. You know, Zerd has showcased to be a amazing card for this deck. They're still playing, you know, 4 of the green overlords, 3 of the white overlords, only 1 of the blue overlords this time. Playing Day Judgment, Elspeth Smite, Pest Control, Get Lost, you know, Leyline Bindings, Seize from Slumber, all these, you know, cards to interact with your opponent early on. 1 Sunfall as well, along with, you know, Analyze Pollen to be a late game ability to go get what we need as far as, you know, powerful creatures just to end the game, or early game to, you know, help mana ramp, or not mana ramp, but to help hit our land drops. 1 Beza as well, because it's a good card. Pest Control is kind of a new one to see put in, but it's not too surprising when we see all this, you know, Esper Bounce running around. It's really good against, you know, that type of deck, being able to hit all their 1-drops in one go. Same thing with why we see, you know, Obstinate Baloth here on the sideboard against, you know, the Esper and Dimir bounce decks, just being able to counteract that discarding a card losing to life type situation. Same thing with the Rest in Peace here with all the other, you know, graveyard strategy decks running around. And nothing too surprising here. I think this deck is really well positioned. I think that you can get, you know, if you ever get to play Zerd and activate it, you pretty much get to just gain so much life out of nowhere against most of the decks that are running around. It kind of helps you just kind of close the door against the aggro decks as a whole. Obviously, it's not, you know, game ending for sure. It's not something they can't come back from, but it does just buy you so much time with that. Yeah, I mean, Domain is a solid strategy. Like I said, no one's going to laugh at you for taking this to a tournament. No one's going to be, well, people are probably upset when they lose to it just because no one likes losing to Domain. It always feels like you were cheated somehow when you're playing against Domain. Whether or not you were doesn't matter. It just always feels like it, at least to me. Or it just feels like you're ahead, and then you like blinked and like, all right, well, I have no board state. They have 4 overlords. What happened? At least that's how it always feels for me. That's not obviously the case. I don't think Domain players are cheating or anything of that nature, doing anything ridiculously crazy. It just always feels like you're cheated when you're playing against them somehow. Because Up the Beanstalk is a hell of a card. But you know, this is what was happening this, you know, past weekend for Standard going on. It'll be interesting to see, you know, what Aether Drift adds to the format. I'm kind of curious to see if there's anything that breaks out or does anything super crazy this first weekend. As always, guys, if you like what you're seeing, like what I'm doing, go ahead and leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, let me know what you're most excited for about Aether Drift, and I'll catch you guys next time.